Putin's right to be worried. Putin's right to be uncomfortable. Yes, he's gotten weapons and ammunition from the North Koreans. He used to get something from Iran, as you indicate. That's not looking so good for him. He's lost other supporters and other sources of influence in Syria, as you say, and Venezuela. So yeah, Putin's looking isolated.
As Europe begins to stand up and begins to provide more and more support into Ukraine, not relying on it coming directly from the United States, do you think it's coming to a position where actually the United States' role in supporting Ukraine is waning, and it'll get to a point where actually it's not as needed as people made it out to be whenever Russia carried out its full-scale invasion, almost 4 years ago now?
I think that's right. That's certainly the trend. Two things are going on at the same time. The Europeans and the Ukrainians are building up their capacities. We've already talked about the Ukrainians' drone capacities, long-range drones, the attacks on military targets and energy targets, oil targets, shadow fleet. The Ukrainians are getting very good at that, and they are making a lot of what they use. They're making those drones. They are making, I understand, 50% of the weapons that they use on the battlefield today. 50% come from Ukrainian sources. That's up from 3% back in 2014. So this is an amazing increase in capability, defense industrial capability on the Ukrainians' part, and the Europeans are doing the same thing. So the Europeans and the Ukrainians are building up their capacities, not just defense industry, but also their weapons, the provision of weapons, and their political support for Ukraine. They're building all this up at the same time as they're trying to keep the Americans engaged. They're trying to keep President Trump on side for as long as possible. They know that the Americans, that President Trump is not going to be there forever. They understand that. The Europeans and the Ukrainians understand that. They want to continue to cooperate, work with, encourage Americans to be there and support the Ukrainians for as long as possible. And that continues. That continues along. There's, as you know, intelligence sharing that continues, the indirect supply of weapons, as you just indicated. The Europeans and the Ukrainians are buying weapons from U.S. sources, U.S. manufacturing. So that's continuing as long as possible, while the Ukrainians and the Europeans build up their own capabilities. So that both of those things are going on at the same time.
But at the same time, Vladimir Putin's global support base seems to be waning. He lost support from Bashar al-Assad in Syria. He'd invested an awful lot of military capability into supporting him. He's just lost the support that he had from Maduro in Venezuela. There are unconfirmed reports, and it's probably speculative reports, that the Chinese are considering options to land grab should Russia fall apart at some stage in the future, given the investment that they put in supporting Russia so far. And of course, we've got the growing situation that there is in Iran that is very difficult to work out exactly what's going on at the moment. But do you think Putin is beginning to feel more isolated as his coalition of the willing and wider BRICS members seem to be focused on their own issues? I think at the moment is a better way of describing it.
I think you're right, Philip. And I think Putin's right to be worried. Putin's right to be uncomfortable. Yes, he's gotten weapons and ammunition from the North Koreans. He used to get something from Iran, as you indicate. That's not looking so good for him. He's lost other supporters and other sources of influence in Syria, as you say, and Venezuela. So yeah, Putin's looking isolated. He doesn't have great support whereas Ukrainians have continued support from Europeans in particular, but yes, also from the Americans. We're still there, as I say. We won't be there forever, I am sure, and no one wants us there forever. But for now, that support is coming, and that's got to be bothering Putin. That has got to be concerned about Putin as he sees his support fade, and he sees the support for Ukraine continue, even increase.
But at the same time, inside Ukraine, we've had the corruption scandal where President Zelensky lost his chief of staff, and he's just promoted General Budanov from the head of the GUR to be his new chief of staff. He's moving people around in his intelligence agencies. How much do you think that corruption scandal has hurt Zelensky? And how much do you think his reshuffling that's going on at the minute is going to strengthen his position or otherwise?
Philip, it is interesting. It is interesting. Maybe it's even ironic that the departure of Yermak, the chief of staff, has had the effect of boosting Zelensky and therefore Ukrainian strength, coherence, political support within the country. Um, Andriy Yermak was very capable, very smart, worked very hard, was very loyal, but was very controversial and is gone, is gone. And that has enabled, as you just said, General Bogdanov to come take that place and to focus on part of what Yermak used to do. And now Zelensky is looking to his prime minister, a very good prime minister, to do the domestic part, which is what prime ministers and the cabinet is supposed to do. You know, they're supposed to do, but Andriy Yermak used to do that as well. This is to say that I think Zelensky is delegating more. He's got strong support in his own office now. You've mentioned General Bogdanov, but there's also Kyslytsya, Ambassador Kyslytsya, who was the ambassador to the UN for Ukraine. He is now the deputy. So they've got a very strong presidential office on the security side, and he is delegating more of the political action, domestic political questions, issues to his prime minister, as he should. So I think on net, President Zelensky is better off. Yes, that corruption is damaging. He's made the right decisions. Zelensky has said the right things about encouraging the investigation, getting rid of ministers who were implicated, cutting ties with a former business associate who I guess now is Israel anyway. So Zelensky is doing the right thing in terms of that investigation. He's he's moving the right people into the right positions that give him more strength. Certainly on the military side, security side, and delegating to the prime minister so she can do her job on the domestic political side.
But one of your roles as ambassador is giving the President of the United States an understanding of how the government is being run and what levels of corruption there are, and what are the pitfalls inside Ukraine. So you are probably as one of the better observers out there as to what's going on. There's an awful lot of accusations of corruption around what Zelensky is doing through the war, the Ukrainian government, and everything else. How corrupt is it?
So, Philip, as you know, all of the nations, all the countries that came out of, that emerged independent from the Soviet Union have corruption problems. By far, the most corrupt nation in that part of the world, maybe anywhere, is Russia. Transparency International does a rating every year. And Ukraine has gotten better and better. That is less and less corrupt in the Transparency International ratings, whereas Russia continues to be near the bottom because Putin is the richest man in the world, having stolen from his country. So let's just be clear about the relative corruption, if you were. Number two, the Ukrainians have taken it very seriously. They have taken it very seriously. They've put in place anti-corruption institutions like no other nation in Europe, no other nation in the world, I believe, that has this strong. When President Zelensky made a mistake this last summer in trying to reduce or take away the independence of those two main anti-corruption organizations that have been set up to ferret out corruption at very high levels, when he attempted to, and indeed got the Rada to pass a law taking away the independence of those two organizations, those two agencies, the country went crazy and demanded that he reverse himself, and which he did. Within 2 days, he reversed himself. Some people say this was a suggestion, another bad suggestion for Andriy Yermak. We don't really know. President Zelensky was, in the end, responsible for that decision, and he fixed it. He changed it. He pivoted. He passed got the Rada to pass another law to make those two agencies independent again, and they are doing the work. It's these two agencies that have identified the problem in the energy industry, in particular the nuclear and the protection, the defense of energy systems that is racking them right now, that caused the Yermak to depart and these other ministers to leave. It's those two agencies that are working. The message here is the Ukrainians know they have a problem. They've set up things there and those set up organizations to counter and to go after that corruption. It's working. President Zelensky has been very clear that he fights corruption. Not only that, when I was there, he made a point of saying, "Listen, I'm not here to fight corruption. I'm here to eliminate corruption, to defeat corruption." Now he's got a big job, as you just said. I mean, all those nations have. We all have problems. The Americans have problems. Maybe even the Brits have problems. But
Oh, believe me, we do.
and so what we have to do is deal with that, and we do deal with that, and the Ukrainians are too.
And the old saying is Rome wasn't built in a day. But whilst Putin's got all of these problems that are going on, whilst President Zelensky's got all of these problems that's going on, whilst Europe is trying to get itself up to where it should have been decades ago, and put things together, it seems that President Trump is not averse to throwing the odd little complex issue into the international field, especially around Greenland. That seems to be undermining the real fabric of NATO and how NATO's held together. And this must be something that President Putin is sitting there. I often describe this as behind his big oak desk, with a very large glass of best Russian vodka over ice, with a big white cat on his knee as he's stroking it, going, "Yes, what's going on with Greenland?"
Inexplicable. It makes no sense.
Good. I'm glad you said that.
I can't come up with any rationale. Everyone has I mean, it's been pointed out over and over and over that if Trump or the Americans want to have more support, more forces in Greenland and Denmark are happy to have it.
Yeah, well, the 1951 agreement allows it to happen anyway, so without even consultation with Denmark.
Absolutely. And there used to be 5 or maybe even 17. There were a lot of forces that had been in Greenland that could go back without, as you say, under an existing treaty. President Trump seems to say that there are all these Russian and Chinese ships that are surrounded. Well, no one can find them. No one can see these ships.
They're disguised as polar bears.
Polar bears. Polar bears. So yeah, I have no. And the other side of that is true, that you just mentioned. That is, the alliance is important. Americans, we need allies. We need allies to do any of the things that we're talking about doing, in particular vis-a-vis Russia, but also vis-a-vis China, also vis-a-vis Iran. We need allies. So to gratuitously go after one of their best allies. Denmark has been a great ally from the beginning of NATO. To go after that makes no sense.
So, briefly, as we come to the end of our time, what do you think is going to happen through 2026? What are your predictions?
What I hope happens, Philip, is that what we talked about earlier continues. That is, Trump continues to understand, continues to get irritated, continues to recognize that Putin is playing him along. And that if Trump really wants to end this war, for whatever reason, I don't think there's a grand strategy there. I don't think there's an allegiance to the liberal international order. I don't think there's any of that. But what he does want to do, he wants to end the war. And he wants to get a prize for ending that war. That's fine. If he does want to get that prize, if he does want to end this war, he can put those sanctions, they can reinforce those sanctions on the Russian oil and gas sector. He can provide the Ukrainians with additional weapons that complements what they're already doing. He can support what the Europeans have done in terms of that $100 billion, 90 billion euro loan to keep the Ukrainians going. We can support that. We can go after that $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. There are things that President Trump can do in 2026 that he's thought about doing. He's thought about those sanctions. He's thought about going after that shadow fleet. He's thought about the Tomahawks. He's thought about those 300 billion, or at least the 5 or 10 billion that's in the United States. There are things that he can do that he's considered that his administration's ready to do if he were to give the word. And once he realizes that that's what it's going to take, that's what it's going to take for him to do that, to win that prize, to end this war. I think that will happen this year.
Well, fantastic. Ambassador Taylor, I'm sure President Trump will be listening in to Times Radio Frontline. We hope he's an avid listener and watcher, so and he'll take on your advice. But thank you very much indeed for talking to me today on Times Radio Frontline.
He should be listening to you, Philip. He should be listening to you very carefully. But thanks for having me.